the most highly acclaimed female sportscaster in US. You are the first woman on Monday Night Football, the first to win the Lifetime Achievement Sports Emmy, the only winner of Billie Jean King Outstanding Journalist Award. So why sports? Why particularly did you choose this field? Has there been any specific reason behind that?
Kami, thanks so much for asking me that. As a child, I just loved sports. You know, other young people love poetry, or they love music, or maybe they want to be an actor or an actress, and I just genuinely love sports. I wanted to know who won. I learned how to score all the games by the time I was 8 years old, and I didn't know that the job did not exist for women.
And were you active in the sports when you were back in school?
I was very much a participant. I captained 3 sports in high school, but not that many women played high school sports when I was in high school, which was in the late 1960s. And then we had this really important legislation called Title IX that was passed in 1972. And that's part of the reason, actually, that I was invited here by the State Department. A great friend of mine, Sarah Talalay, who works at the embassy, she had been a journalist in the United States. And, you know, we shared how important this legislation was, and it opened it up for women. It was an amendment, educational amendment, about opportunity, that women should be treated the same as the men, which didn't state in there it referred to athletics, but it was applied to athletics. And that's why, if you follow any, you know, Olympic sports, global sports, women are so successful because they had this opportunity now for the last 50 years.
We don't really have women sportscasters in here, and why do you think is that? Why do you think there's not so much interest among women?
I found that in all societies that men don't usually give up any power unless it is voiced or demanded. And mine was, I knew that I had the knowledge and I had the passion, and I just needed the opportunity. And that was provided for me on a scholarship, an internship. Yeah, it was real fortunate. They gave out 20 scholarships in America for women who wanted to go into jobs that were 95% male, which I know it sounds like the 1800s,
Yes.
but this was in 1974. And obviously sports writing, sportscasting. So I had the opportunity, and I did well enough with it that I kept getting more assignments. I'd get hired full time. But I do think that there is a prejudice against women, that either we can't know the sports the way the men do, or that it's always been a male profession. If there are any young women out there who want to cover sports, they should apply for it. They should demonstrate that they're qualified, and they shouldn't think, oh, women don't do that, because they do.
How can we encourage them to do that? Because they are afraid that they're not going to be met by society, that men here watch football, you know, it will be weird for them to watch women, you know, voicing out about sports and stuff. So they're afraid.
And that's exactly what happened, was thought of me in the beginning. Our football is the biggest in America, not the same as your football, but our football is. And I became the first woman ever inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And it was because I had the opportunity, and I didn't shy away from the criticism. I mean, there was a lot. People didn't want to hear me talk about football or write about football. But I always said that men here too, they were not born knowing about football. They learned it because they loved it. And not everybody played it. And even if I didn't play it, I have studied it, I know it, I'm very comfortable talking about it. And that's true for any woman in any profession. I really think women now should be able to feel that they can do anything. And when I speak at groups, I say, I don't care what your dream is, I am the example that you can do it.
Have there been any challenges or obstacles throughout your career?
Oh, yes, many. Terrible. You know, I had times that a player would say, if she comes in to the locker room, I won't speak to anyone. so that it put me against the other reporters, and I had to depend on the kindness of some of the other reporters who would stay outside with me. And the first 7 years I covered our football. There was no ability to go in post-game, to go into the locker room, and I did all my interviews from the parking lot. Yeah, which was really difficult because I was always, if I talked to this guy, I couldn't get that guy. And the wives were not crazy about me. You know, who is she, this alien? Why is she talking to my husband about football? But I think my passion was greater than the challenges.
Here in Uzbekistan, people mostly prefer to watch football, box, or judo. And what is the most promoted sport in America?
By far, our football, which is called the National Football League, NFL, and that is the biggest sport that, by far. But basketball is big, which is big around the world. And soccer now, we're not very good. We call it soccer. But we're coming. We're in the World Cup. But and women's sports have really exploded. There were always women tennis players, but now colleges have great teams, which is, I'm not sure if you have that equivalent where if you cannot be a professional, I don't know, do colleges have women's teams?
Yes, they do.
Here they do.
Yeah.
And so that's another avenue. But what differs is people who remember here when it was a Soviet republic, which maybe your grandparents or parents do, that I did many stories, what we called the Iron Curtain, behind the Iron Curtain, and those athletes were selected by the government, and they were put in the Soviet system, and had many tremendous. You have Oksana, who's so brilliant, and she's known in America. She's regarded as a legend, but they were identified for what sport would suit your body. You know, were you a swimmer? Were you track? Were you gymnastics? Whereas in America, the child indicates what he or she likes to play and then gets the opportunity. It isn't that the government identifies the child. So it's just a different system, but it all works, you know, everybody goes to the Olympics.
Could you highlight any particular, great experiences throughout your career that you will never forget?
Oh, thanks. I have a couple of them. One, CBS sent me to the fall of the Berlin Wall. It was so profound for me. I was doing a story. There was a great athlete named Katharina Witt. I don't know if you remember. She was from East Germany. She was the beautiful face of socialism, and she won 2 gold medals in skating. And she lived a Western life in East Germany because she was so popular. But going from West Berlin to East Berlin when the wall fell, 1989, was so profound. It was like the world went from color to black and white. And they were only a mile apart. But because the life they had led in East Germany under repression and fear, and they were monitored all the time, and the athletes had been doped, the Stasi, which was the secret police of East Germany, had been doping the players. And so the fall of the wall broke this all open. But I remember seeing people who in East Germany, they walked for days with just a backpack, and they walked from Potsdam and Dresden just to get through the Brandenburg Gate to taste freedom.
In December, Qatar will host FIFA World Cup 2022 and bringing the world's most precious tournament to Middle East, which is first time in the history. And U.S. will be the part of it, of course. To what extent do you think U.S. team is ready for this?
The problem with soccer in the United States is that all the other leagues are so established, and it's hard to get in the calendar. It's kind of like basketball in America takes up 5 months, football takes up another 6 months, then there's baseball. So soccer has just never been stressed. But America is a very competitive place. And, you know, we kind of, if we do something, we want to be the best in the world. So, I mean, the U.S. is nowhere near, you know, Brazil or England or Germany when it comes to soccer. But the women have won. They've won the World Cup maybe 3 times now. And women's soccer in the United States, because that was their best opportunity. And they They've won World Cups, Olympics. They are household names.
Oh, so they're more active, right?
Yes, in the United States. But I remember I was invited to speak in Doha right after they won the rights to host it. It was 10 years ago. That's when they bid and they won it. And I went to Doha to speak, and I remember the medical community was very concerned because Doha in the summer can be 120 degrees. And the doctors said, we don't want to be responsible for soccer players exerting themselves, for the fans being so hot in the stadium that this could be a very serious medical problem. And so if you noticed, they moved the World Cup. And normally it's in the summer, and now it's coming up starting right now because the doctors said, you know, we can't have this. So, but it's a beautiful event. I've covered it twice, and it's so passionate. You know, it's just, it is the world's game.
Yes. Do you have any memories from covering this?
I do. I remembered I covered one that was in France in 1998, and the home country won. And just the whole country, well, of course it ended in Paris, and the whole, they were all in the streets, and, you know, it's such a joyous occasion, the World Cup, and pretty much everybody in the world follows it. But what I like about it is that countries, you don't have to necessarily be the richest country. I remember when Cameroon, small African country, they got, I think, to the quarterfinals or maybe the semis. And so that's what I love about sports. It's really about your talent, not about how much money your father has or the government has, because either you can play or you can't.
So as a journalist, you know, you have to memorize a lot of information. What advice would you give in terms of, you know, life hacks about how to memorize these stuff, how to train your memory?
Yes, you do have to, one, you have to be a great observer. All journalists are great observers. And I always, when I speak at colleges in America, I always say, don't use words like amazing or incredible, because they don't say anything. Tell us what it smelled like. What did it look like? What did you notice? So I think that's the first thing. You have to make a memory of what you're seeing, and then you have to practice the names. I will tell you, Kami, you'll get this. The hardest for me was figure skating, and many of the athletes are Russian, the great athletes.
Yes.
And so, you know how in skating they cover the whole sheet of ice for a jump, and they cover? Well, I used to feel like that when I had to interview them, that, oh my gosh, they're covered, here they are. And they were always names like Berezhnaya and Sikarlidsta.
Oh my.
Right? And that's not natural to me at all. And so I would have to go over and over. And sometimes what I did was I wrote it out the way it would sound rather than trying to do the Russian. So that Berezhnaya, I would write what that sounded like, and Sikarlidsta. And those were really hard. Olympics are hard because they come from all over the world, you know, and they're, like I had one skating example, beautiful skater from China named Lu Chen, and in the middle of the competition, she changed her name to be Chen Lu, or maybe the other way around, because I guess it was an American audience, but, you know, I had already memorized that was her name, and then 3 days later she changed it. So, I mean, you have to be, I'm sure you know this too, very flexible.
Oh, yes, that's
true. A lot
true.
happens, yeah. And thinking on the fly, so.
And what would you recommend to the young journalists who are passionate about sports?
A couple things. One, you must have knowledge, because knowledge gives you confidence, and that no one can challenge it. If you know it, doesn't matter, you know, if someone's old or young, male, female, if you know it, then you have that confidence. And I also think the best for learning sports and how to commentate is to, on the television, turn the sound down. So it's not what I or someone else is telling you. What do you see? You know, do you see that in the football game they're doing this on defense, or maybe they have another a scorer in there that they think will help them? But you have to notice if you were commentating on it. And I think that teaches you what is important in a game.
Thank you so much for this interview. Thank you so
Carmen,
much.
thank you. It's really delightful. I hope to see you in America one day.
Yes, hope to see you too.
Okay. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.